and welcome back to Frankly Speaky. I'm your host, Frank. Tonight, you know what? I want to touch on this Harrison Butker issue going on. It's really sweeping social media and just the media in general. Of course, that's the field goal kicker of the Kansas City Chiefs, who said what many leftist communists are going to call them that. Basically said were controversial issues when he talked about family, the importance of motherhood, the importance of masculinity, the importance of children in the home, the importance of family structure in life, something that has absolutely deteriorated in America over the past 50, 60 years. And it's fascinating because the screeching on the left to me only highlights exactly how broken the American family is, and how much our culture has deteriorated, because he says nothing more than what Catholics have always believed, and to a certain extent what Protestants have always believed. These are traditional norms, these are traditional values, but we know that through cultural Marxism and really the takeover of Marxism of the West in America since the end of World War II, the family has been under attack. You know, as I've said so many times to you, especially when I've had historian Charles Colomb on this podcast, you know, he talked about, and I'll give him credit where credit deserved, how the attack on the West, the post-Catholic West, and let's remember that, post-Catholic West, was a three-pronged assault. The Protestant revolt was attack on the church, the altar. The attack at the Enlightenment was attack on monarchy. And of course, the 20th and 21st century has been an attack on the family. Altar, throne, and family have been attacked. You know, we've seen the church diminishing its role, particularly in the current crisis that we have right now. We've seen all the monarchs, the Catholic nations all collapse. And now the family has been in a constant state of bombardment by the culture and by governments all over the world since at least the sexual revolution, at least, right? I would go back probably earlier than that. You go back to the gay 20s, they called it, or even the Industrial Revolution, as plutocrats or plutocracies rose in that period after industrialization and began to minimize the role of the family in so many ways by first undermining agricultural society where families could be independent, where families could work together, forcing everybody out into this usury system, which was the first attack against the family. See, this is the interesting thing, because the political right is going to tell you how this is cultural Marxism and how we've had this attack by communists on a social front. And while a lot of that is true, the first attack actually came against the family from the classical liberals. It came from the bankers and the usurers. I'm not against the idea of exchanges of goods and services, because there's a role for that. But the problem that the right has always had is they've always been entrapped by how to control when oligarchs and plutocrats rise to dominate society and culture. And we've had this in the West, particularly in America, since really the Industrial Revolution. You know, it's funny because for the political right, they believe today that somehow Google and Apple and all these entities now dominate the world and are shutting down free speech. Well, that was happening a long time ago with the Rockefellers. It was happening with the Vanderbilts. It was happening with the, you know, all the industrial giants at the turn of the 20th century. It's nothing new. And this is why America has always needed a permanent underclass of sorts in order to maintain the economy. We saw that with immigration from Europe throughout the 1800s and the first half of the 1900s, and then lately we've seen it, of course, south of the border. Part of it is economics. The other part of it, I would argue, is the replacement theory that we have going on. And so economics plays just as big of a role, particularly capitalist economics, that the political right has never been able to control in any kind of way. It's kind of that double-edged sword, freedom, 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 until that freedom is used to destroy the very thing they love and they don't know what to do with it, right? It goes back again to the problems they've had with corporations, because for 50 years, it was the political right defended corporations in the name of freedom, liberty, corporations. They provide goods and services and efficient rates, and they give us all jobs and provide all these great items. And then all of a sudden, the last election, they found out that, oh, the corporations turned on us. They're making us follow all this woke stuff and they're limiting our speech. And oh, but when we were telling you what happens when a company becomes too big and begins to buy out government, then what do? Is that freedom? See, there's always this confliction with the political right. As far as the political left, there's a great skit right now on by the Babylon, was it Babylon B? What's it called? That satirical site, and I'll post it here. Put a link on in the description that talks about how all these extreme leftist groups had a meeting with Satan, and how even for Satan, the political left today is going extremely too far to such a degree that they're revealing their hand, right? Because Satan rather use a, sort of a slower, more quiet, less obvious tactic. But the political left is making it so obvious that they're in some deep, dark, satanic camp at this point that they don't even mask anymore. They're dastardly sort of efforts at this point. So it's kind of a funny thing. And so, but this Harrison Buckner thing has been all over the place. It's been sweeping the media. They've been looking to get rid of the kid. I believe there's a let's see, a petition. It's up to like over 130,000 signatures to force the Kansas City Chiefs to fire him. Of course, now there's a lot of information going back and forth now, and I don't want to cite things that are inaccurate because I've been duped before, and I'm very careful about it. But apparently, head coach Andy Reid has come out from quotes that I've seen. I haven't verified it yet that Andy Reid, who I think is the best coach in the NFL right now, is standing by Harrison Buckner, basically saying, listen, you get rid of my great kicker, I'm gone too. And trust me, the Kansas City Chief ownership doesn't want that. Not after winning 3 Super Bowls in the past 4 years. He's also got public support from defensive tackle Chris Jones, who's another great player in the NFL. And so these players are standing by him right now. A lot of them are. I can't speak for Travis Kelce and and what's her name, Taylor Swift. I would imagine they're on the other side of the camp. But it's funny that with the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift thing is that his behavior as a man is very, very erratic, and I'm concerned for Travis Kelce and his partnership. Let's call it that right now with Taylor Swift is not surprising. From some of the things I've seen and heard about Taylor Swift, some of the dark elements she's involved in, and she's got a character, a guy that's involved in, well, he's got a wild side to him, let's put it that way. And so I'm not shocked by that relationship, and so that's interesting where that's coming out. But there was a show, oh gosh, I forgot which one it was, one of these daytime shows on mainstream TV where you had 2 gals on there who came out to talk about a national audience about the problems or the difficulties or the hurtness or how they were disturbed about Harrison Buckner's comments about women, right? Because that's what it's really all about now, is really supporting the matriarchal society we've become and the diminishment of masculinity in the West. And it's funny because we've been going off the cliff since at least the 1960s, like I said, as feminism rose, as women have gone into the workforce, as women have become more, I guess, public figures, I could say, in the society. And with that has come a whole host of problems, particularly with the idea that men and women are competing, especially in the economic, because you have a thing in America, as I said in last cast, where if the greatest virtue in America is to make the money, where the mature dialectic is what makes you a great citizen, how can you deny and how can you not expect women to pursue material greatness in the sort of the realm of finances and economics? And this is something that's been a massive paradigm shift. And I think it's something of a purely liberal and classical liberal nature that they've lost control of at this point, because they can't make the case for motherhood anymore. They can't make the case for the family anymore. It's a good idea, but they've taken all incentive away by decoupling the incentive of men and women being these complementary creatures where they work together. It's one of the great faults of classical liberals, and the far left communists have jumped on this weakness because there's no counterbalance. It's simply, okay, let's go out and make the money in America, right? That's what makes you a great citizen, right? If you listen to, talk radio for as long as I talk, or I listen to it back throughout the 90s and the first decade and second decade, start of the second decade of the 2000s, there was always this thing on the right about trying to prove what is the greatness of modernity, what is the greatness of the modern culture, especially America in and of itself. And, it was always a shallow argument about materialism effectively and achieving as Americans all this great status by achieving heights of materialism, right? Whether it's working up the corporate ladder, whether it's playing the stock market, becoming wealthy, whether it's buying and selling homes, it always revolved around the economic engine of prosperity and this material financial wealth that makes so Americans great and so exclusively, superior to every other civilization that's ever lived in the world. And so this has left a moral deficit that for the classical liberals, they've never been able to fill, right? They try to make suggestions within the moral realm. They try to talk to people on a social scale, say, okay, well, we need children and we need strong families. These are the bedrocks of civilization, but you disincentivize everything for families to not only be prosperous, but you disincentivize for families to actually grow. The entire West has done this, right? And you see this in the massive declining birth rates of the West, including America. For many years, it was interesting to me that Americans always made fun of the Europeans, particularly Italy has a very bad fertility numbers. Japan has terribly low fertility numbers, and so do a bunch of other European nations right now. And it's led to a situation where Americans, for a short period of time, maybe about 10, 20 years ago, had this superiority complex because Americans were still having children. We were having more children than the replacement rate. The replacement rate is 2.1. America was at one point, I got 2.3, 2.4, while the Europeans were collapsing well under 2, well under the ability to replace themselves. But of course, economic metrics also matter. And what was happening in Europe post-World War II with the infiltration of communism and far leftism, things that has directly affected America because of the vast barriers and borders, which was the Atlantic and the Pacific, protected Americans more, but also because geographically America had a lot more territory and resources, which matter. America was always on borrowed time, a lot more than the Europeans, who were more interconnected and I guess crowded together to bring out a lot of these social dysfunctions. But Americans don't like nuance very much, never have. Rah, 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 we're number one, we're the greatest all time. This is basically the talking points of the right. But here we are, just what, 10, 20 years after the superiority complex was developed, and America's birth rate is right there, right next to the Europeans. We're down to what, 1.6 now? So we're not replacing ourselves. And you could argue, I bet you, and I haven't delved into the numbers, but if you remove the Hispanic birth rate and maybe a few Mormons and maybe a handful of trad Catholics, those fertility numbers are probably right down there with Italy and Spain and Japan. Let's be honest here. But again, Americans don't do well with nuance. We create narratives is what we do. And we have to create a sort of pseudo religion to cheer for ourselves. And it's unfortunate because America could stand on some good merits without a doubt. And so it's interesting to me, right, when we hear these far left, sort of, what do you want to call it, paid actors on NBC and CBS and ABC show outrage because Harrison Buckner pointed out a major flaw within American culture, and that is women pursuing sort of material excellence like men. And as a result of that, we've had declining birth rates, abortion rates, broken families, and all the moral disorders since the 1960s. See, nobody wants to talk about that. We ignore that, right? We have a bunch of feel-good, patronizing talking points about supporting women and equity and inclusion and all these leftist communist code words that effectively mean nothing when we look around and the country is in a state of absolute moral chaos at this point in time. And that moral chaos, for my friends on the right, is leading to cultural and political chaos, which they're having trouble dealing with, right? This left and right paradigm is a mess because both sides of the aisle have missed the memo. And so when we get a story of a devout Catholic man who goes to a Catholic university to express Catholic ideas, Catholic thoughts, Catholic doctrines, where all of a sudden now we even throw out the religious liberty clauses, we're trying to get him fired. And let's be honest, this whole religious liberty thing in a Protestant country, it was never going to work long term. We know it's eventually going to get shut down, and it has slowly but surely over time. They're just very subtle about it on the far left at this point, and so we're just going into an area of what appears to me, what a lot of people have prophesied for a long time, and that we're going to probably go into an age of persecution for Christians, right? I don't want to be melodramatic with that. I think a lot of people believe that. We have some biblical prophecies that back that up. Some other issues that have been brought up, especially as Marxists take over more and more. They're going to be as subtle as they can about it, obviously, right? Even though I think the far left is really showing their hand more and more at this time. And so it's amazing because if you listen to the speech by Harrison Buckner, he really just gave an option to young ladies that, listen, this is the way society is pushing you, right? Economic engine of prosperity, climb the corporate ladder, pursue material excellence, pursue the awards of the world, pursue everything that life gives you in a secular society. But don't forget about the natural instincts of motherhood and of being a wife, right? Because this is what women have been for thousands of years in much healthier societies than what we have today. And I've known many women that have pursued that material excellence, and as a result of that, all kinds of moral dysfunctions that have come along with that. I mean, obviously, the abortions and the sterilization of women is something that we always talk about here, but also, too, the sheer unhappiness of women, the sheer instability within relationships and marriages, the instability in regards to mental health that affects many young ladies because they've betrayed their natural calling of being mothers. They betrayed their natural calling of being wives and finding a complementary relationship with a man where they work together hand in hand to bring about families, right? Again, being a child of the old world as I was a witness to this. And, it's funny because I look around our society today, and then there's a few good marriages still around that I know, a few couples, but the strongest marriages I've ever knew in my life was, from that old world, that old Catholic world, where marriage was permanent, children were valued. There wasn't an overambition to pursue the material world. Obviously, there's always some of that. We're human beings, we're flesh, we're blood. We want to be able to take care of our families. But the divorce rate from let's say my Italian Sicilian culture was almost non-existent in my grandparents' generation. My parents' generation was a little different because when they started coming over here from the fatherland, it was American liberalization that started to affect them. Then we began to see one or two here, and then my generation, the whole thing just explodes. And of course, in Italy, you had the same form of liberalization that hit Italy after World War II. Communism and Americanism both kind of tag team Italy after the war. Communism becomes a big party and a big movement in Italy. And of course, democracy comes in. The Americans set up a weak democracy and lots of influence through banking and usury to alter the mindset of a Catholic nation and to liberalize it. And ever since then, Italy has been struggling, right? It has become, in effect, the French Revolution, which was being blocked out up until the end of World War II, pretty much takes full effect in Italy. And this is what I believe has also affected the church and the crisis that we have today. I think Spain went through something similar, right? Spain held on until Franco, but then a weaker monarchy that Franco set up that caved into the socialists and the communists right away has weakened Spain to such a degree that they have all the same problems that Italy does. Not only falling populations, but less people going to church. And I would argue that was the whole intended goal of World War I and World War II, anyways, was to put the final nail in the coffin in the Catholic world by the communists and by the classical liberals. But that's for another time. And so I guess I don't understand. Listen, I get what the controversy is, right? Feminism has to maintain its facade, right? And lead women into peril constantly. They won't put it that way. They'll put it in terms of freedom, liberty, but it has. Women have fallen into great peril. And they've fallen into great peril because as a result of this ambition of the material world, they've also fallen into great moral despair, particularly great impurity amongst women, which presents lots of problems because men and women in that regard are built different, right? We know that for women that have great amounts of impurity in their lives, they have more difficulty creating pair bonding. And as a result of that creating pair bonding, marriages don't last. I mean, there's a reason why women initiate 70 to 80% of all divorces, and even bigger if they're college educated, women initiate 90% of all divorces, right? See, and that's my point here. While the entire world is coming down on Harrison Butker for his supposed sexism against women, it is women that have led the way with the destruction of the culture and the family. I'm not discounting what men have done because men are broken too in a lot of different ways. But clearly, feminism has led the charge here with a 90% divorce rate initiated by women, breaking families, multiple sexual partners, aborting their children, sterilizing themselves to such a degree that the West is now, it can't sustain itself through fertility rates, right? This is why we're importing lots of immigrants at this point. That's part of the great replacement theory. And business is going to use that. But as a byproduct of that, it changes our culture. It changes our culture from something that was Christian and Western at one time to some great, big, massive mashup that has no values. And this is why so many people feel lost in the West today. You know, it's funny. More and more people are telling me personally, Frank, you know what my American dream is? And I said, what? To leave America. To leave America. But the problem with leaving America is, of course, is where do you go? Because the entire West has been liberalized since the end of World War II. That which America, the British Empire, and the communists in the Soviet Union gave us after World War II. You know, it's not like it's easy to pick a place on the map where you could find some bastion of conservatism, or I don't want to use the word conservatism. That's the wrong word. Conservatism is it's an American concoction of the big pluralistic tent of the political right in America. But notice this: how many Catholic nations exist after World War II? Right? The Catholic world had an empire for 1,600 years, let's call it. And after World War II, all the Catholic nations were gone. Okay, you want, what is it, Malta? Andorra, I believe, is a Catholic nation. These are tiny, tiny things that still may be Catholic, right? I don't know. Either that or they capitulated to liberalism in one capacity or another, most likely anyways. But because we Catholics were effectively told after World War II, nope, sorry, you can practice your faith, but only within the realm of liberalism. And look where we are today as Catholics. Our church has been ransacked by liberalism, progressivism, masonry, whatever you want to call it now. And it's brought the destruction of the West, a destruction of the West that even the classical liberals can uphold anymore. And so what Harrison is going back to are the standards of our grandparents, that our grandparents held, where they kept their families in check, where they kept their families in place, where we had strong familial bonds, where culture was rich, and even to a certain degree, the political system made much more sense than it makes today. Because the other thing I'm hearing from a lot of Americans now is how they've lost faith in the political system. That, you know, they're just dumbfounded at this point as to what to do, because they're seeing all their values, all their beliefs, their faith, their families, everything is being eradicated in the world that's just gone, excuse my language, batshit crazy. And if we're being honest, if you really want to trace it back, this thing really goes on steroids at the end of World War II. And what does that tell you? Did the good guys win World War II? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not saying everything was perfect on the other side, but, you know, a very liberal administration in Franklin Roosevelt's administration colluded to give Joseph Stalin and the communists a worldwide empire. And that's effectively what we're living through today, post-World War II. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm just pointing to World War II because it's something I've looked at. You want to go back to the Industrial Revolution. You want to go back to the French Revolution. You want to go back to the Protestant world. There's all liberalism there spread out that you can say, okay, this was the problem. Pick a date, right? Pick a date. And World War I and World War II were the culmination of all these other events that had driven the West mad and batshit crazy at that point. And so here we are with a complete liberalization of the world. I mean, you know, again, I'll give you an example. Look at Italy before 1945 and after 1945. It was a Catholic nation. Families stayed together. Women were modest. Men took care of their families. It was a very, again, Catholic conservative nation. Same with Spain. When did the disorders in Italy and Spain begin? It's after the war. It's after liberalism is imposed on those nations. Liberalism and democracy, for that matter, with a mixture of communism, right, as well too, because communism went running rampant. The moment, you know, certain authoritarian governments are defeated, there's nothing left to push back against communism, because liberals can't do that, right? And democracy becomes a perfect vehicle for communists to hijack an entire nation. And that's what we saw. And with that comes the great moral disorder. So for all the women that are offended by Harrison Butker basically saying, hey, stay home and make babies, I think it's something that more women should consider. Now, I understand there's nuance in life and there's difficulties and there's extreme situations, without a doubt. Not all women can stay home, but the standard bearer of which where women are competing with men has created this friction between the sexes. Look at the modern dating world today. There's nothing there for men. Nothing. Why would they want a clone of themselves? The things that men value in women, women of the West have opted out. And then those same Western women get angry at Western men because they become passport bros, right? Because they go overseas to look for more traditional women. Well, you can't have it both ways. Either you're going to give a man what he wants and what he desires, or at least in regards to appeasing some of his preferences, or the man is not going to want you, right? Because, see, men are not allowed to have standards. Women are, but men are not. That's part of the feminist demasculization of men thing that has been going on since the sexual revolution. And now men are saying, listen, I'm going to a non-Western nation. The West has been corrupted by communism and by classical liberals. It's gone. I'm going to Asia. I'm going to South America. I'm going to Africa. I'm going to non-Western nations to find me a bride. And this is why. I believe something like 40% of women are on a trajectory by the year 2030 to be alone and childless by the time they get into their 40s and their 50s. What does that tell you? All your kowtowing about the discrimination, how Harrison, put down women. No, what puts down women is when they're all alone without children and without a family and without a husband, because you're not going to be there. You may take offense to it, but he's appealing to natural law and natural rights and the natural inclination of women, which has been suppressed in the name of liberalism. That's the irony of it all. And I thought it was a very brave speech, to be honest with you. And whether Harrison understood that he was going to get this reaction, I don't know. But it was a speech that was necessary, and it's needed more necessary. And see, this is the outrage, that we don't get speeches like this, that these ideas are just, killed off in the ash heap of history, that no man ever dare speak like this again, right? Equality, egalitarianism, right? Men and women, you make the money, I gotta make the money. And of course, the children, they don't exist anymore. They've been wiped out. We are a childless society in the West now. That's what feminism and liberalism and communism have given us. And while these paid actors go on MSNBC and CNN and ABC, to show this, virtue signaling about standing with women and, women's rights. Yeah, look at society around you. It's collapsing all around us in every which way. I mean, so, for me, this is one giant ruse at this point that the West has become. The West is collapsing at this point, and it's collapsed in the wake of liberalism. We had to get rid of that dastardly Catholic world because there was too many Harrison Buckners in those days that said, you know what, men and women have certain roles, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that old world was better than the world we have today. I don't care about your electronic gizmos. I don't care about your fake economic engine of prosperity, even though it's all been done on debt for the past 50, 60 years. Never mind that. We'll talk about that some other time. But the world has gone off kilter. And until we acknowledge this and forget about the political talking points of the day and become brave, and it's up to men now at this point to become brave. It's up to the Harrison Buckners of the world to speak up. I like to think, to a certain degree, I'm a voice of reason for that. Not just standing up for men per se, because to me, it's not a battle between men and women. For me, men and women are complementary. Men and women in the sacrament of marriage are supposed to work together. Yes, a woman is to bear children, be a mother, be a homemaker, be at the service, for the service of her husband. But the husband is to love and to die for his wife and his offspring. Husband makes all the great sacrifices in order that his wife and his children have everything they need in this world, including laying down his life if need be. There's I think it was Chris Rock, comedian Chris Rock, right? You guys know Chris Rock. He got slapped by Will Smith. Sorry, which was disgraceful by Will Smith, of course. I saw a clip of his, and I don't know if this originally is his. He said, only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. Men are only loved provided that they provide something. And for the most part, that's true. Women are loved for their beauty, their charm, their comfort, their motherly instinct that we all want. Children, of course, are children. They're beautiful. We protect our children. And dogs, of course, they're dogs. We love dogs. They don't got to do nothing but wag their tail. But men are only loved if they provide something, if they are a provider. And I think that tells you something intrinsic about the nature of the sexes that is different. See, women want a man that provides. Women that go to high places, high earners, high achievement, want another man that's equal to them. Men, on the other hand, are different. Men could be the high achievers, but if the woman treats him well and he gets what he wants from that woman, social status, money, none of that matters to the man. Man wants peace in the home, and he wants a woman that will provide that peace in that home, provide children, provide all the things that men desire. Again, women just operate different. They seek different things. And when women act like men, generally speaking, men want nothing to do with them. That's why a beautiful, feminine, holy, pious, modest, virtuous woman is the greatest prize out there. And I suggest to all the women out there, if you want to pursue a career, that's your choice. But that intrinsic nature of motherhood and being a wife and maintaining a home, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world, because of all the great women I've known in my life, almost all of them have been homemakers. Kudos to Mr. Harrison Butker for telling the truth. And I'm going to stick up for him. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. This is Frank signing off for Frankly Speaking. Good night, everybody.